Breslow. Find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Watch our YouTube channel, Hidden Truth Show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Here's Jim Breslow.
Welcome back to the Hidden Truth Show. In last week's episode, our guest, former Air Force intelligence specialist Mike Turber, revealed that the Tic Tac UFOs shown in the Navy video released earlier this year are, in fact, secret U.S. aircraft. If Mike is to be believed, this represents perhaps the greatest scientific discovery in human history, as well as one of the greatest government cover-ups of all time. According to Turber, the craft creates its own dense and polarized energy field, which allows it to create a quantum vacuum around itself, which allows it to escape the effect of gravity and repel any air or water molecules with which it interacts. Due to the vacuum, it can operate as a hybrid aerospace underwater craft capable of incredible feats of speed and maneuverability and can fly equally well in air, water, or space. It exploits, not violates, the laws of physics. The craft are built at Plant 42 in Palmdale, California for the Air Force by private contractors. Turber even hinted that he has ridden in one and that Trump sent one over to North Korea to show it off to Kim Jong-un. If you've not listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend you do so now. It is our most listened to episode to date. The lingering question on everyone's mind, including mine, is whether Turber is to be believed. We are digging into Turber's claims, and we'll have experts on soon to address them. We have also sent press releases to the mainstream media, but thus far they have refused to cover it. However, talk show host and longtime UFO aficionado Jeff Rense was very interested in the episode and invited me on his show to discuss it. Jeff Rense was voted the world's fourth most influential voice in alternative media. He is listed among TalkStream's top 50 talk show hosts in the world, and Talkers Magazine top 100 hosts in America. According to Bacon's media source, his show is simply intelligent, discovery radio at its finest, and produces material which aims to be vital and addictive, compelling, and life-changing. We're going to play the highly entertaining interview for you now. And for listeners who have been tracking our coverage of the Las Vegas shooting, you will note that we discussed the shooting extensively in the first 20 minutes or so of the interview. Rense was very interested in the fact that Turber was an investigator of the shooting. Rense does not believe that Paddock acted alone, and he questions whether Turber is a disinformation agent for the government based upon his involvement in both the shooting and the Navy UFO video. Here is my interview with Jeff Rense.
Friday, November 8th already. All right, moving right along, as they say. Get ready for Thanksgiving, and then we're going to tumble through the holiday season. And it's going to be rugged. I do expect next week, unless she's got an incredibly strange plan of laying off after Iowa and after New Hampshire, next week Hillary has to announce. They did push it back to the 15th, and I thought it was the 11th, but it was not announced, and we were just projecting. Now we know it's the 15th, next Friday for New Hampshire. So we will see. Lots of things going on. Now, there's another story that has been in the news, and it has a lot of very strange angles to try to figure out. We're going to talk to Mr. Jim Breslow these first 2 hours about the Navy's Tic Tac UFO story. You remember that one? At least two fighter jets off the U.S. aircraft carrier off California. And this happened all the way back in 2004. Now, some of you will remember that first the one commanding officer of one of the planes came forth, and then the second one came forth and explained what they saw on their radar. The alleged addition to Navy ships of a new kind of radar purportedly allowed them to see these tic-tac-like objects. Now we're getting some very strange information that these objects, remember this goes back to 2004, aren't UFOs, that in fact they have been identified now, they're IFOs, and they have been identified allegedly by one source, this is wild, as ours. Our technology, our Tic Tac tech, as it were. And we need to find out. I'm looking forward to finding out a lot more about this. I was somewhat concerned that the Navy would go all the way back to 2004 to release some video and allow pilots to talk in public about it, when we all know they have warehouses full of other, even more impressive data, footage, video footage, film footage, first-hand account footage, shoot-down footage, you name it footage. So why did they go back to 2004? Why this clever little title, Tic Tac? And in point of fact, if the Navy said, yes, we see these things often, off the East Coast was that particular comment and its direction, not off California, but they saw them apparently off the middle of the East Coast often, commonly. So when the Navy said that, in fact, did it not represent the formal, official end of the cover-up? Sounds like it to me, but is the Navy now trying to wriggle out of it by allowing a story appear, or at least make the rounds, that, gee, that technology was ours? I mean, it's all a little crazy now. Jim, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Did any of that make sense, what I just said?
Well, the first part about Hillary joining the race makes sense. I hope that happens, because I just placed a bet on her to win at 25-1 in Vegas. So
that's the odds. That now 25-1.
She's 25-1. I mean, she's a big long shot, obviously. Elizabeth Warren is by
she's
far
as
the favorite.
good as. You can put that money in your pocket right now. She's in. She's going to run. They've got nothing. She's the only thing they have.
That she actually becomes president. So unfortunately, that was the only bet I could place. I would much rather have bet her to join the race and or to win the nomination and not beat Trump. But the only thing I could bet was to beat Trump, and that's 25-1. But yeah, she's a clear long shot. But I've been thinking this for a few weeks now, that clearly she's jumping in. I mean, there's just such a dearth of candidates, and she can't help herself but join in.
The jackass parade of donkeys is what it is.
That's another way of putting it. But anyway, that's not why you wanted to have me on. As far as the other stuff, yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun to talk about what we learned in talking to this gentleman on my Hidden Truth podcast. His name is Mike Turber, and he is a former Air Force intelligence specialist from the 80s. And he came on on my show and told some very fascinating information about these Tic Tac UFOs that were seen, and disclosed what he says they are, and he's saying it on very good information as long as you believe him. So I'm going to share with you everything that I learned from him and things that I've been investigating as a result of doing that interview. But I do want to provide the caveat that you and your listeners, I'm sure, know all this far better than I do. I am not a UFO aficionado. This has not been my expertise or an area of specific interest for me. I followed it generally like most people do. But what really caused me to delve into it was getting this interview with this guy who we had been in touch with as a result of covering the Las Vegas shooting. He had been working on behalf, as an investigator, on behalf of a number of the victims and their attorneys in suing the MGM over the Las Vegas shooting, and my podcast did a deep dive on the Las Vegas shooting. So he was an incredible guest for that, always very informative.
Jim, before we jump into Tic Tacs, I'd like to spend a few minutes on that. We covered that story from the night it happened for weeks here. I have a huge section on it right now. We've got video of all kinds of things. There were many shooters involved. This was a very sophisticated event. In point of fact, Paddock probably didn't shoot anybody. He was set up, executed in his room. He was a mid-level or low-level, who knows, CIA arms merchant. He was shot once, didn't die apparently, had to be shot a second time through the mouth. There were two bleed-outs. The first bleed-out completely went into the carpet, and then there's a fresh one next to it. So what's going on with that? And these are all from photos that were released by Las Vegas Metro. So I'd like to know, first of all, let me do this. We've spent so much time on the massacre there. Who is this guy? Is he an attorney? Is he just a private investigator? What is his status? I understand he's representing some of the victims. Tell me more, please.
Well, again, yeah, he got involved very early on. I think he was actually listening to the police scanners as it was happening. I don't remember the story as to how he got involved so early on, but he lives out here in kind of the San Bernardino area, and I think he headed to Vegas the very next day. In fact, he collected glass from the base of the Mandalay Bay and even gave me a piece of it. So he was there very early on, and as a result, connected with some of the lawyers and was helping out as kind of a victim's advocate, et cetera. And so he's well known in the Las Vegas Route 91 community. And so
his name is Turber. Right.
Yeah, Mike Turber. Now, by the way, Turber would not necessarily agree with some of the things that you just said. I would love to have you on my show at some point for you to share more of what you guys have discovered.
Oh, we turned up a lot, and it's not hearsay. It's hardcore.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, one thing I would say, we interviewed a ton of survivors and so on, and this thing I will say, I'm not sure I've spoken to anyone who was at the event who didn't say there was multiple shooters. Because, for them, it felt like it was coming from all directions, and without a doubt, it was, different sounding weapons, coming from different directions, et cetera. However, that is possibly explained by the fact that, you've got a bunch of tall buildings around there, not to mention the audio system that's turned on still, where shots can be echoing around. Now, of course, I'm sure you've also covered the fact that people continue to hear shots, or at least think they heard shots, far after the shooting. In the couple hours subsequent to that. I mean, people that were there, it was a wild scene, and for them,
I had survivors on, and there's no question. They found a pile of brass casings over by the trop on the ground. I've got freeze frame stills of 2, maybe 3 shooters on top of one of the trailers that were used by the entertainment acts. Crawling up. They're all blacked out. You can see their weapons. They're getting into position. I've got muzzle flash from the 5th or 6th level of the Luxor stair-step architecture on the side. We've got muzzle flash from a room 7 stories above Paddock's suite, and yet in all the footage, not any muzzle flash from Paddock's room. We do have the video of the girl who was taking cover, who moved out after she heard a single gunshot following the cessation of all the automatic weapons firing. There was one single shot followed by another single shot, and she looked around the corner, this is on video, and said, there is glass falling from the Mandalay Bay. Probably Paddock's window was shot out at the end of the massacre. That's what we think. The room was a staged set. The window 7 stories above Paddock's is open, broken out, shot out, we don't know. The drape is clearly flapping in the wind. This is 7 stories above on the top 5 floors, owned by Prince Walid bin Talal, to be formal, where the Four Seasons restaurant is. What was going on in that room, where we do have muzzle flash, near the helicopters which were going by shooting? What was going on here? Were they shooting from up there at the Delano? There's a big Saudi factor in here that we haven't been able to fully assess and nail yet. Maybe someday. But the top 5 floors of the Mandalay, as you know, are owned by Prince Walid, and there's something going on there. Then we got the cab driver. I had one person on who was actually in hospital, had shot through the back, came out the front, somehow miraculously survived that. Then there were the 2 people in their 50s, early 60s, driving home. And you mentioned San Bernardino. I think it was San Bernardino. It might have been Riverside. I think it was San Bernardino, though. They were driving home after having been home for about a week or so after the massacre. They had the biggest, strongest Mercedes on the road. They're a half a mile or less from their home. All of a sudden, a Mercedes goes off the roadway that they've driven for many, many years at 30, 35 miles an hour, hits a brick abutment around an iron gate that opens, driveway opens to another residence. And then the car bursts mysteriously into flames and burned for 2 hours. I found one news story, said the fire department, it took them nearly 2 hours to put out a car fire. So they had been there. They survived. They were talking about what they had seen, apparently too much. Just like the young woman in Apple Valley, married, or I think it was her boyfriend. Anyway, first time her boyfriend or husband had to leave her in the morning and go to work after she returned from being a survivor of the event. He had to go to work. He came home. She's dead. Okay? The first time he had to leave her alone in the house. She was scared to death to begin with. But the story goes on and on and on and on and on. I'd like to hear what you know from Turber and see if there's a spin that he's pushing. I'm curious about this.
Well, he's pushing what would be considered, broadly speaking, the non-conspiratorial theory, the kind of the party line of what Vegas police would be saying, and what he's no fan of the Vegas police. Nobody who's covered this is a fan of the Vegas police at all. Blanking on the sheriff's name for a second, but it'll come to me. But
Lombardo.
The guy was, Lombardo, yeah, Sheriff Lombardo. He was just absolutely horrible as how he handled the press and everything else and not disclosing anything.
He was handled. He was a sock puppet. The FBI came in and made him dance the jig. He was sweating it out. You could see it. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and the FBI certainly played a very significant role in the investigation, ultimately concluding that it was Paddock acting alone. What I found very significant was the fact that ISIS claimed responsibility for this thing twice through their official channels, and it had never been a case before where ISIS had falsely claimed responsibility for a terrorist act that had come through their official spokes.
That's the Arab
people.
Involvement in this thing. Big time, big problems. The top 5 floors, Prince Walid, and there are rumors that the footage of the 5 armed guards, some in police uniforms, in fact, most of them, weapons lowered at the gamblers, the customers in the trop, not up in the air, lowered at them, pointing at them as they walk this guy through the casino. It looks exactly like MBS with a shaved beard and ugly red cut-off pants on, dressed like a bum. They were guarding this guy and bringing him out. We think there's something might have been going down between Prince Wally and MBS that didn't work out the way they were thinking. There were shots in the trop. There may have been an attempted assassination of MBS to get him out of direct line of ascension to the throne, the kingship of Saudi Arabia. Prince Wally might have been jealous. We don't know. But there are many angles to this which do not point in any way to Stephen Paddock. Sorry for going on, but I just want to lay it out.
Yeah, well, I think, it cries out for a unifying theory that would explain, all the things that you're talking about. Because if it wasn't just Paddock acting alone and there really was shots from different directions and so on,
Paddock was
and
a
down
patsy.
the strip and up the strip.
Lee Harvey Oswald. He was a patsy.
Right, but a patsy for who and for what purpose? I mean, if you're going to replace the Paddock acting alone theory, you got to have a better theory that works and can explain all the things that you're talking about. And I'm just saying right now, I don't think anybody's really put all the pieces together to come up with an alternative theory that 100% works.
I wish you had spent some time with us, but you're a busy professional in your own right. We have presented helicopter muzzle flash, muzzle flash, muzzle flash, muzzle flash. Not a joke. These aren't anything other than muzzle flashes. And you're correct about the different weapons involved. We've had military experts on. Those were machine guns, heavy weapons in some cases. That cab driver video that you've heard many times, she's right underneath one of them. That was an M60.
I interviewed her.
There you go. Yeah. Good job. Good. All right.
Corey Langdon, I think was her name. Anyway, I mean, but as far as there being evidence of this, I mean, I know there's video and there's eyewitness accounts and so on, but, if another window was shot out, where is that shot out window and where's the glass from that? If other were casings from guns from other locations, where are, bullet marks from other...
They were picked up by the cops. They were in front, and there's a pile of them in front of the Tropicana in the parking area there on the ground, which would have given the shooter perfect direct access to shoot into the crowd as it was running toward him. They were there. A guy who was a survivor walked the entire path, pointed where the shell casings were. He said, I stepped on them. They were right here, blah, blah, blah. So this is a very complex story with no easy, simple conclusions to come to, except I do not find anything that points to Paddock having anything involved with the majority of shooting, if any shooting. In point of fact, it's almost impossible for him to have shot that accurately that many rounds, which if you look at the pictures of the room that were released by Metro, they're not, and they say he fired at least 1,200 rounds. There's not 1,200 casings on the floor. I counted between 180 and 200 max. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's still a mystery, and but as it pertains to Turber, I can just say that he was investigating and trying to track down all kinds of theories, as was I. I mean, I'm very open-minded to anything this could have been, and that's why I started it. We started it in February of last year, so just a few months after was when we really started digging in, and we did about 25 episodes on the shooting. I was the only one to interview his brother Bruce, who lives in Los Angeles and was facing child pornography charges at the time. In fact, I sent somebody over to the courthouse, and there he was in a wheelchair, and she offered him a cigarette, and next thing you know, they hit it off, and I had him on the show a week later,
Good job.
talking about his brother and the bizarre upbringing that they had. They had the father who was on the FBI's most wanted list, and he was an absentee father, et cetera. And there was definitely some very odd things going on in that household, and I did find it very odd that both brothers are alleged to have had child pornography. As you know, it's believed or reported that Paddock had it on his computer that was found in the room, and then you've got the brother facing charges of child pornography. So that's a rather bizarre connection.
The brother in Florida, where was he? Florida? Yeah,
Florida.
Well, he was flapping, and at one point said something like, I'm going to paraphrase this, let's just be honest, Stephen was an and he was saying arms dealer, and he stopped. Oh yeah,
I remember that part. Yep.
Okay, so there you go. That's another issue.
Now, Turber, by the way, to bring it back to Turber, he got very close with that brother. So he's got a very good relationship with him, talks to him all the time. And they're putting together a Vegas documentary with a guy named Ramsey Dennison, I believe is his name, who had done already a Vegas, he did one Vegas documentary. He's big on Vegas police corruption, this Ramsey Dennison.
He'll never run out of material.
Yeah. So anyway,
hold on if you would, Jim. We got to take a break here.
Okay.
Only one break per hour. That's it. So it's easy. This is a very big story that has been broomed out of the news, as we all know. It's good that there's some investigating going on. I'm sure there's maybe more than one documentary in the works on this, or I've heard tale of them. We've had no autopsy reports released, as you know, not one, which would be forensically embarrassing, clearly, because the entry wounds would not have come from above in many cases. So it stinks. How's that for a summation? The whole thing stinks. We got 58 dead. We honestly think it's more than that, but that's the official number. Hold on a minute. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk Tic Tac Toe tech next. All right, this Tic Tac Toe tech, as I call it. There's a press release that we got from Michael Parker. Thank you, Michael, if you're listening in. I imagine you are, for helping us set this up with Jim tonight. I'm going to read just a little bit from this press release, and I'll toss a question at Jim. One of the most incredible scientific discoveries in human history has been achieved by the U.S. military, but has been kept secret until now. During an exclusive 2-hour interview on the Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow, released today, that was November 4th, 3 days ago, Michael Turber, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence specialist. Real quick, Jim, did you see his credentials?
No, he was a specialist in the 80s, so I'm not sure what he would have had from that. But I encourage people to go on his LinkedIn for whatever that's worth. Mike Turber, you can, and I can even read a little bit of his background on LinkedIn if you'd like. But
very good. Yeah, let me do this, and then we'll do that. Revealed that the Tic Tac, those UFOs shown in that now very famous Navy video from the F-18, I guess they were Super Hornets, F-18s.
Yes.
Are in fact, according to the press release and what Turber is saying, gravity-defying aircraft developed by the Air Force. And while the information is classified, Turber more than hinted that he has in fact flown in one in a cross-country flight which took just 84 minutes. In addition, he discloses that President Trump, soon after being briefed on the technology, ordered one flown to North Korea to show off to Kim to gain leverage in negotiations over nuclear weapons. I don't think the leverage worked because nothing much has been done. In the interview, Turber states to our guest, Jim Breslow, the technology was originally developed at 2 universities and was made available to the advanced DARPA as part of the U.S. Department of Defense responsible for the development of emerging technologies. DARPA had been attempting to develop the Star Wars project, as you remember, back during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. This Tic Tac aircraft creates its own dense and polarized energy field, you can call it a plasma field if you want, which allows it to create a quantum vacuum around itself, which allows it to escape the effect of gravity and repel any air or water molecules with which it interacts. It's kind of like a cavitating high-speed underwater torpedo. Creates an air bubble in front of itself, so it's just moving through air rather than dense water. Without the effect of gravity, the Tic Tac can move at extremely high speeds, confirmed to be at least 24,000 miles an hour. Due to the vacuum, it is a hybrid aerospace underwater craft capable of incredible feats of speed and maneuverability and can fly equally well in air, water, or space. It exploits, not violates, the laws of physics. The craft were built at Plant 42 in Palmdale for the Air Force by private contractors. All right, if this can do 24,000 miles an hour, and America is about 3,000 miles across, and Mr. Turber said he took a ride in one and crossed the country in what he described as only 84 minutes, what's 24,000 miles to cross the country in 84 minutes, the arithmetic doesn't add up. That's number one.
No. I'll address that now if you want to, or keep going.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, obviously the craft that he flew in didn't fly that fast because a human could not tolerate the G-force that would be involved in going 24,000 miles per hour.
Supposedly there are no G-forces, though. If it's got a plasma field around it, it's encountering nothing, no gravitational impact, no water molecules, no dust, no dirt, no nothing. It's in its own little cocoon.
I don't know if that means you would not have a G-force. I mean, if you've got acceleration, then presumably you'd have a G-force. But I'm not a scientist. But anyway, I think that's what Turber would say, is that a human
would
would
plasma
experience...
craft situation, the common nomenclature says no gravity, no G-forces. That's how they do it. That's just what I hear. I haven't been in one. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mr. Turber maybe has.
I mean, if that's correct, that would be arguably a slight hole in his story. He says that his flight was designed to go no more than 1 G, and therefore he said he experienced very little to no acceleration in the craft.
Maybe they did. Maybe it was a recreational trip they took him on, and they didn't want to smash him up against the inside of the craft, if that's a problem.
Yeah. And apparently, if you did a 1G calculator, and you calculated it, it would take you approximately an hour and 24 minutes if you were never accelerating more than 1G, and then halfway across the country you started decelerating.
I haven't been able to do the math, but I believe you. Yeah. Good projection. Okay. All right. So tell me more.
So anyway, yeah, that's according to him. Now, he felt very comfortable disclosing to us what this thing was, and the fact that it is absolutely positively the Air Force. It was the Air Force craft, and he says that they were kind of actually toying with the Navy a little bit, but really the way he describes it is they wanted to see how the Navy would respond to seeing these things. So as a part of testing them, you don't want to test them over Russia to see how Russia responds. Let's test them over our own U.S. Navy and see how they respond. The U.S. Navy was conducting various exercises off of San Diego, which it often does. And when they do conduct exercises, their planes are not armed, so they knew they were safe to test these things without getting them shot down. And the reverse is also true, that the Navy commanders were comfortable sending these things up there unarmed, not knowing what they were going to go encounter. You would think that you'd want to send armed craft when you're going to try to encounter something that is unknown, but they very comfortably and confidently sent these guys out there to check it out unarmed, and that's because the commanders knew what it was. Only the commanders, only the highest level knew what it was. The pilots did not know what it was, and frankly, to this day, don't know what it was. I just heard one of them on Joe Rogan's show a couple weeks ago, who said that, he told the whole story and what he saw, and absolutely positively saw something. And, the Navy is confirming that, yes, these videos are real. Yes, our pilots encountered something, but we don't know what it is. And what Turber would say is bullshit. They do know what it is.
What?
Yeah.
Go ahead. No. Go
ahead. In that it's actually Air Force craft. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about these Navy patents in a second, but this was Air Force craft encountered by the Navy.
The Navy had a brand new form of radar, and it was deployed on ships. From what I heard, it was not in the F-18 Super Hornet. Maybe it was,
correct,
but they definitely had it on the ships. The ships saw it and sent the jets in pursuit. Am I correct?
Yeah.
In your
and that's a pretty and that's smart of you to know that, and that was a big point of Turber in the interview, was that, and I forget it's almost like a 4D type of radar essentially that was able to pick it up, and the craft that I forget what they call the craft that flies above the F-18s that's got the radar and it supports the F-18s. That does not have it, so that craft was not able to pick it up. The radar on the Princeton, which is a part of the Nimitz carrier group, did have that type of it did have that type of radar. And what Turber says is that type of radar is now going to start becoming more universal. Other countries are starting to have it. We will start to be able to use it across the entire United States, and that is in part the background to the story as to why it's coming out now and why Turber is raising it now, because soon these things are going to be, they can't hide these things anymore. So these things have been around for about 20 years, according to Turber. But, excuse me, as this radar technology expands, both in the U.S. and internationally, they're not going to be able to hide these things anymore. So the idea is to start leaking out now what they are. There's no reason, it seems to me, that our government should want anybody to know about this until the appropriate time, I guess. But they've managed, which seems odd to me. I believe it's hard to keep secrets, especially this big of a secret, when that many people know. I mean, there has to be hundreds of people that know about this, and that has been kept secret up until now.
And it's been kept secret for 20 years or more. So that's the word. The new radar, by the way, for those of you listening, the plane that had top cover above the F-18 Super Hornets uses traditional advanced, but it sweeps. It's literally a sweep on the dial. It goes around and around. It sweeps. The new radar is pretty much static on the screen. It just shows what's there. Okay? It doesn't have to do a sweep. You don't have to wait for the sweep to come around to see what has moved or what is in position. Or what may be there in any case. There you go. When this story came out, and Turber's revelations would, of course, turn the whole concept of the Navy has now stated that the cover-up is over, we are being visited. Because the Navy said, and I remember this, we don't know what they are, We don't know whose they are. We encounter them all the time. They are unidentified flying objects. Now, that would suggest that even at that point, the Air Force still hadn't communicated with the Navy that, hey, no, they're ours. So, it's service rivalry? What do we got? What do we got here?
So what Turber would say is they did know what it was, and that part, they're just not coming clean on that part. So they're willing to acknowledge the video, willing to acknowledge that the pilots encountered something, but they weren't willing to, because, the Navy commanders, he said, did know what it was, hence the reason they were comfortable sending those jets up there to check it out unarmed.
Okay. All right. Very good.
But there is this other Navy link where there's these patents that the Navy just recently got issued. I'm talking about within the last couple of months, originally filed in 2017, but just issued by the U.S. Patent Office. And it seems to describe these Tic Tacs and all the technology behind them, yet it's the Navy. So, it's very, and, of course, we also have the incident off the East Coast that they call Gimbal. And that was off the coast of around Jacksonville, Florida. And that particular incident I haven't looked into as much as the Nimitz, but it's basically the same story. And according to Turber, those that were seen on the East Coast is actually a different craft using the same or similar technology built by a different private contractor at Plant 42. So this Plant 42, you probably know about it, relatively new to me to learn about it, but this is where all the secret black box type of technology is being developed in Palmdale, exactly. And so Lockheed will have their section there, and Raytheon will have their section there, et cetera, so that the military is confident that whatever is being worked on is kept absolutely, strictly confidential, as opposed to trusting whatever Lockheed has.
You're really putting some really good information out here, and I wonder if the Air Force did not have whoever originated this technology would have filed for a patent. I don't care who it is. That's what they do. So why now? Is this a variant that the Navy has been given the green light to go ahead and file a patent on? It's odd that they do that.
I've also read that I am a lawyer, although I'm not a patent lawyer, but I have filed for patents before, so I have a very general knowledge of patents. But I did read that apparently, I wasn't aware of this, you can file for them to be kept private. So, you have to make a particular showing to the patent office that,
I didn't know this. So you got to present a case, and they'll maybe,
so probably
national
it's,
security
and... Exactly. Yet they didn't file for that on this one. And I'm looking at one of them right now, and the inventor is this very interesting Navy scientist who's actually on a number of patents, Salvatore and then Pais, P-A-I-S. He's on as the inventor on a number of these patents, but the assignee is the U.S. Secretary of Navy. So it's a Navy-owned patent. It was originally rejected by the patent office because the patent examiner was essentially saying that this isn't possible. I can't patent something that's not possible. And the CTO of the Navy writes a letter to the patent officer saying that it absolutely is possible. In fact, we are currently conducting tests on the thing right now. And he explains that China is also on the heels of adopting this technology, and we need to move quickly, and we need this patent protection. And sure enough, as a result, the patent office granted the patent. And there's some great articles written about this on the drive.com, a website I was not familiar with. It's mostly about cars. Are you familiar with this website by chance, the drive.com?
No.
Yeah, really well-written stuff. We're going to be actually interviewing these guys on the show next that have written some of these articles about this. But that's where I first learned about these patents.
Written articles about
Primarily about the patents. I mean, they're writing about Nimitz to some extent because they're connecting the two. They're certainly not saying anything along the lines that Turber is saying. And in fact, in my discussions with these guys in preparing to interview them, it sounds like they are skeptical of Turber's story. I'm not sure why they're so skeptical, considering that they are absolutely very familiar with these patents that the Navy has filed that seems to describe exactly this technology. So, it is earthly technology. I'll just give you the headline as an example of one of their articles. Documents show that the Navy got UFO patent granted by warning of similar Chinese technology advances. Patent documents indicate that the U.S. and China are actively developing radical new craft that seem eerily similar to UFOs reported by Navy pilots. So, these guys, I'll give out their names because they deserve credit, Brett Tingley and Tyler Rogoway. But, this particular article was written June 28th of this year. So they're basically saying that, yep, there are patents that describe the craft that was seen by these fighter pilots off the Nimitz. So I'm not sure what it is that they don't believe about Turber's story. Maybe the fact that he hints that he rode in one. And by the way, I'm saying that he hinted to it because he was indicating that that's not something that he is permitted to officially disclose. But
all right,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, but he hinted enough about it that I feel comfortable saying that he strongly hinted that he rode in one.
Okay, fair enough. I'm sure you're accurate. If these craft are not acquirable by traditional Navy and Air Force radar, which is pretty damned advanced, and this new radar, I've forgotten the name of it now, which doesn't require a screen with a sweep on it, can pick them up. Why are they visible? I think those were IFR videos that were released, infrared. So they're not visible to the naked eye because of what? Because of the so-called plasma around them. I'm using the term plasma, not anyone else. Because they move too fast. What is it? What makes them? What cloaks them?
I think what Turber said when we discussed that was that at the time of the Nimitz incident, they could be seen by the naked eye, but further technology since the Nimitz incident has made them more predator-like with some type of technology that makes them semi-invisible.
So they're screened. All right. Now remember, the Nimitz event was 15 years ago. All right. Keep that in mind. This is a long time ago. 2004.
Right.
So,
and according to Turber, these things are first flown in the late 90s.
All right. These Tic Tac shaped objects, are we to think that did Turber imply or infer in any way that there were other shaped craft using the same tech that were flying around? Or is this the big breakthrough, and this is right now, this is state of the art to this day, and this is the Tic Tac tech that we're talking about? That's it. No discs, no rectangles, no flying triangles, no cigar-shaped UFOs, just Tic Tacs. Is that what we're saying?
I believe he would say the gimbal was similarly shaped, but the triangle shape is definitely very significant, and that shows up in the Navy patents. But they end up ultimately, and you got to really know your stuff, quantum physics-wise to understand these patents. And I could read you some of it because it's fascinating. But you really got to understand it. But anyway, in some of the drawings in the patents, you see these triangle figures. But then one of the drawings shows the two triangle figures inside of the Tic Tac shaped object.
All right. What did Mr. Turber tell you about the size of these Tic Tacs? Now, we've all seen the video, and I think this is IFR video. How big are these things supposed to be?
He was pretty specific on that. Yeah, he said, I forget if he said exactly, it was 40 some odd feet. It was approximately like 42 feet long.
Okay.
And approximately 20 feet wide.
Okay. That would we can get a mental picture of that easily. Round the edges, paint them white, put them in a plastic dispenser, and you got Tic Tacs. Now, when you talk about putting two triangular craft in a 20 by 40 foot Tic Tac, it doesn't work. Those triangular craft are by all accounts big, a couple 100 feet long on the side, many of them. Big.
Yeah.
Even the TR-3B would never fit in a Tic Tac. These are big items. They're big machines. So maybe it's some small scout triangular shaped craft he's trying to describe, but in a 20 by 40 foot, that's pretty small. Pretty small.
Yeah. Well, especially if at least some of them have an inner cavity which can carry human beings, which is what
of course
Turber hinted at.
So he hinted they were crewed by humans. All right. So if they're crewed by humans, 20 by 40.
No, no. Normally they would fly without humans.
Okay.
So yeah, they're basically drones.
Drones, all right. All right.
But they're capable of carrying humans. But again, because of the G-force situation, which we talked about earlier, according to Turber, because of G-force, they would only be able to fly so fast with a human in there.
All right. Now, I am not out to impugn anyone, but we need to go back to Mr. Turber and spend a little time on him. What in the world is his access that would allow him to hint or suggest that he got taken for a ride on a Tic Tac?
Well, as far as what he did while he was in the Air Force, he did a lot in radar and electromagnetic fields, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of an expertise of his. So when it comes to radar, he's an expert in that. And he only spent 4 years, according to what he told me and what's on his LinkedIn with the Air Force.
What years were those approximately?
Like 84 to 88.
Okay, so if he's... Yeah. But here's my point. I'm sorry, we got a break here. We'll come back. But here's the point. 88 is the end of his formal association and affiliation with the Air Force, right? That's what he said, 84 to 88. I'm just putting it out there. Nobody's going to be hung up with this stuff. So from 88 to 2004, when the Tic Tacs were seen, and then when he was on your program, that's another 15 years. What's he doing all this time? And you'd have to have above top secret clearance to be taken on board or to be able to suggest and infer you might have been taken on a Tic Tac ride. You're not some casual run-of-the-street, just regular old citizen who happened to be in Las Vegas for this massacre. Something else is afoot here. Much more to this story, as you know, as an interviewer. This is a big part of it. We'll see what we can do here. We'll come back with Jim in just a couple minutes. Thanks for being here tonight, Jim. I really appreciate it. It's an interesting story, and we'll watch it very closely. Hang on. We'll be right back with Jim Breslow. All right, welcome back. Talking to Jim Breslow, who has his own talk radio program. And this all came about from a press release talking about a man named Turber, who claims that these Tic Tacs are our technology, and that other companies, maybe in globalist international capacity, maybe just companies over in China, other companies and advanced science tech research labs are apparently coming up with the same kind of craft. Now, if these craft are 20 by 40 and they can do 24,000 miles an hour, they make intercontinental ballistic missiles obsolete. You want to deliver a nuclear warhead, you can stick dozens in a 20 by 40 craft, and nobody can touch it, nobody can see it without this special radar, and it can go anywhere it wants on the planet's surface and just create annihilation, havoc, and mass death. So, the age of B-52s and Tu-144s and ICBMs and IRBMs and hypersonic cruise missiles are done. I think an argument can be made for that anyhow. So, Jim, what do you think?
Well, not only that, I mean, it's astounding if you really stop and think about how life-changing this is and how significant it is and so on. But actually, the energy creation and how these things are propelled might end up being the most interesting part of the story. Turber acknowledged that he doesn't really understand that. But if going back to these Navy patents we've been talking about, there's a patent that's talking about the superconductors and room temperature superconductors and nuclear fusion as opposed to fission, which is all, again, somewhat new to me, but probably not to you. But that there's been major advances in all that where basically the standard fossil fuel energies that we think about today are going to be long gone very soon based on some of the discoveries that have come through working with this craft and others. And this is the same inventor, by the way, with the Navy, who's named on these other patents involving this, incredible new sources of energy through nuclear fusion instead of nuclear fission.
Well, hard to know if fusion is enabling these craft to operate on principles of new physics, as it were. I don't know. There's some energy source involved, yes. What it is, I could only guess at, and that serves no purpose. Let's go back to Mr. Turber. I'm very interested in how a man who comes up with a story like this on your program, obviously very compelling, just happened to get involved with the Las Vegas massacre. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in cause and effect. I believe in long strings and tentacles and tendrils that connect a lot. Connectivity is the issue. And those are two enormously big, let's call them news scoops, right? He's on the inside of the investigation of Las Vegas. Now he's on the inside, literally, of the Tic Tac tech. So what are the odds?
He is a fascinating person. I thought maybe I'd read for you quickly what he started doing after he left the Air Force.
Go to it. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's very talented. I'm not knocking him at all. I'm just trying to piece this together. So
look, understanding who he is and why he's releasing this information, and of course I'm sure many people are going to say that this is a disinformation campaign, that these things are not earthly, these are extraterrestrial, and the Navy or the military wants to calm everybody down by leaking out that they are earthly. So I'm sure he's going to get accused of that. I go back to the patent, though, as far as describing exactly what these are, and I want to read a little bit of that patent in a minute because it's really fascinating. But let's go back to Turber and what he was doing. So he had, and I believe this was his own company. So this starting in September of '88, which is when he left the Air Force. He calls himself a senior intelligence analyst for Spicy Acorn, which is he said it's I forget the term he used for it, but the word conspiracy comes out of Spicy Acorn, apparently, if you move the letters around. So it's a funny name that he came up with. So this is his own company.
An anagram game.
Anagram. Thank you very much. That's the word. Cybersecurity expert and senior intelligence analyst with over 30 years experience with the ability to direct, plan, or implement cybersecurity policies, counterterrorism, defensive measures, determine threats against systems and infrastructure, recognize and act on attacks against systems, entities, or organizations, effectively implement plans and strategies to protect agencies, organizations, businesses, and governments to ensure continuing operations in the case of cyber attacks, maximize return on investment by eliminating or reducing loss of critical data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Threat assessment official, regional operations command. So a private contractor, presumably working with the government, as he states there, on cybersecurity and threat assessment, et cetera.
Well, I think I heard the word counterterrorism in there too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
that's a man for all seasons.
So why him? I would just say that he has connections and contacts and friends at Plant 42 that have kept him apprised of these things and decided that it was okay to let him in on the inside scoop. And then as far as flying on one, he did note that it happened to be his birthday. So it was arguably a birthday present from his friends at Plant 42.
Okay.
Would you like
Scotch on the rocks, Jim?
Did you hear that? No, it's not Scotch time. It is. It's 7:14. Darn it, I'm behind. No, that's an iced tea.
Don't let me hold you up. It's fine with me.
That's an iced tea to make sure I stay nice and alert for you.
See, folks, that's the old iced tea excuse on the radio talk show.
How about the patent? You want to hear any of this patent?
Yeah, sure. No, I go back to, I used to read T. Townsend Brown's patents when I was in college, so I'm familiar with what's there to a significant degree.
Yeah, well, if you go to thedrive.com, you'll see the article that writes about these patents. There's about 5 or 6 significant patents in this area, all of them issued pretty recently, but I just find it really interesting how much it mirrors what these Navy pilots saw. Remember, they saw, according to the pilot, I don't think they've got any video of this, of course, but the craft in what looked like to them going underwater. And here, this is directly from the patent. It is possible to envision a hybrid aerospace/undersea craft, which, due to the physical mechanisms enabled with the inertial mass reduction device, can function as a submersible craft capable of extreme underwater speeds due to the lack of water skin friction and enhanced stealth capabilities, non-linear scattering of RF and sonar signals. This hybrid craft would move with great ease through air, space, water mediums by being enclosed in a vacuum plasma bubble sheath due to the coupled effects of EM, field-induced air-water particles repulsion, and vacuum energy polarization. So there you go. That's basically describing the Tic Tac in a patent that was just issued a couple months ago to the Navy.
It's like the torpedoes that cavitate. They generate an air bubble in front of themselves, and that air bubble moves through the water faster than a piece of metal could, and they remain in that air bubble, so they're actually just traveling through air while they're underwater. This technology has been around for a long time. Okay, all right. It sounds to me like Mr. Turber, if I had to guess, and Mr. Turber, if you're listening, this is said with all due respect, it sounds like Mr. Turber is still very much attached to the military-industrial complex and intel agencies community, and maybe charged with leading the news cycle on this particular item of interest, influencing it. I'm not saying it's all lies. I'm just saying that this is a man who you just don't end up randomly involved with the Las Vegas massacre and then taking a ride on a Tic Tac. It just doesn't happen unless you're involved with the intel military community. And who knows what's the truth? I don't know. Obviously, he was a great guest. Interesting as hell. So.
Yeah, and I wish I could get more people to cover it. I've got a very good relationship with Fox News, and I sent them the press release hoping that they would
they're not going to touch this.
No. They didn't tell me why, but you can kind of imagine why.
Yeah.
But no, they would not cover it. And then I tried to do a Facebook ad with the thing, and of course Facebook is rejecting my ad. Then I tried to yeah, I mean, they're just absolutely terrible to deal with right now, which that's a whole other subject. But, I think Facebook should be, they are not the publisher. They're just a platform. I think that people should be able to put up anything they want on there, and Facebook should not be responsible for it. And if somebody puts a lie up there,
what they'll say is, it's a private company. We can run our business the way we see fit. That's the game. That's how they set the whole Internet up. Privately owned corporations, not government. So they don't have to adhere to any government laws. They can operate almost independently of each other, and they do, but they're all connected. So it's It's quite a rig.
Yeah, I just don't like these politicians leaning on them to be regulating speech more.
Oh, please. These politicians, Facebook. Jim, they're communists. Look, I don't want to sound like some arcane holdover from Joe McCarthy, but communism is the issue. Call it communism, call it socialism, progressivism, liberalism. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Ultimately,
well,
this is Marxist or Bolshevik.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, but it's definitely not liberalism. That's what the Democrat Party used to be.
No, these are all labels. They're flowing. Right. They throw these things around like leaves in the wind.
But Jeff, my point is that I think a lot of people don't realize how the Democrat Party has morphed from being liberals to being progressives/socialists. It's just happened without people even understanding the difference. They've just been historically Democrats, and they still vote Democrats, but they don't realize that this Democrat Party today is not what it was 30 years ago. This is not the JFK.
Can you imagine what Party. John Kennedy would say about this? Oh,
unbelievable. Yeah, but it's been slow and steady, and that's how they planned it out, to do it slow and steady. It's not a revolution. It's a slow takeover, and now it's progressivism. It's not liberalism, and I would love for some Democrat to come forward and point that out and bring the party back to classic liberalism. What happened?
They're going to, when Hillary comes in, she will attempt to move the party in that direction. Guaranteed. They got no chance now with these lunatics. Come on,
but it's all relative. Remember, she's a Saul Alinsky disciple. She's a progressive herself.
But watch how they play the game. I know. You're 100% right. It's a freak show. It's all contrived, all controlled, and it really ultimately doesn't matter who's in the White House. It just doesn't matter. They're not in charge. They're told what to do. This government, this world is being run on a level that most people would never be able to believe if you could explain it to them. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't want to hear it. Too busy.
Well, staying with world politics, I do think it's interesting, taking it back to the story, the part that he disclosed about Trump showing this thing off to Kim Jong-un.
Oh, that's. I'm sorry. That doesn't work here. Not for me.
No.
Personally, no.
Why not?
That's ridiculous. What? Donald Trump in his silk PJs at 4 a.m. talking to Sean Hannity about the tweet of the day, says, oh, and by the way, we got this phenomenal technology, Sean, and I'm going to send one of them over there to wow Kim, if not intimidate him. I don't think so. I'm sorry. That's comic book stuff. It doesn't happen.
Well, Trump can sometimes do things somewhat comically. I mean, it's Trumpian, in my view. I think, most presidents would, the story is that he was first briefed on this technology in November of 2017, right around the time when Turber hints that he rode in one of these things. And rather than simply nodding his head and say, thanks, boys, for letting me know, and, let me know if there's any new developments, his reaction is, wow, this is something that we ought to be putting to good use. I'm in this battle with Kim right now.
He, as commander-in-chief, allegedly, sent one of these over there.
Correct. Which, by the way, we could do the math, but as you point out, it could get there pretty darn quick. Probably in about, 5 minutes?
Right.
So he commands, as commander-in-chief, the military to send one of these over to display U.S. military might to Kim. I know it's a fantastical story, but...
it's okay. That's fine. It's part of the texture, part of the fabric. But this technology, and the point is, Mr. Turber suggests that it's been around for 20 years. This story from the Navy occurred in 2004, for openers. Since that time, according to what you're saying, you feel that these craft are cloaked. They're not seen except by this new radar, perhaps. I still think that the military application of something like this is so overwhelming, 24,000 miles an hour. That's far faster than the Russians' best hypersonic cruise missiles. All of a sudden, you have the ultimate takedown intercept weapon, surface to air or whatever, So everything changes. Everything changes. Nothing's the same.
Yeah. Now, what Turber says is they don't have the technology yet for them to carry weapons on the exterior of the craft or to fire them from the craft, because perhaps that would disturb the vacuum. But it certainly seems to me
But if they're drones, like you say, you just steer the drone into any incoming problem you'd want to erase, and it's gone.
Right. Yeah, you just blow it up. Now, but, how would it target? Well, certainly, it could target items on land through some type of GPS technology. I don't think it could shoot things down, because usually we're shooting things down through some type of heat technology, right? But certainly, as far as delivering a nuclear bomb very, very quickly, you would think it could certainly do that.
I would think passing an incoming anything at 24,000 miles an hour, 50 feet away from it would, shall we say, destabilize it just a little. Anyhow,
now, I don't know exactly how many of these we have. Turber says Turber claimed that particular day there was, I believe, between 14 and 20 that were being flown around on that particular day.
Well, the Navy says that does lock up, and you know this. What the Navy says off the East Coast, they've seen scores of them. They see them all. They say we see them often. They're there. They're unidentified, and now the Navy's filed patents for them. Yep. People should definitely look up these patents. They're fascinating patents, but it's kind of an odd twist in a couple of respects. Why are the patents being issued now, in just having been filed for 2 years ago, when this technology has been around since 2004? Can you imagine how angry the Navy would be? And I've always viewed the Navy as number one. If the Air Force had been hiding this from them for 20 years, which is, I think, the general story that was painted by Mr. Turber. The Navy didn't know until
the left hand. It's possible the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, but it was being. It ended up being developed by both sides.
Parallel,
but, why aren't there?
Or was there some cooperation? It's just parallel tracks.
I got to think there had to have been a cooperation, and
of course.
But the way patents work is you've got to patent something within 1 year of discovering it. So
I'll tell you right now, if the Air Force had a patent on this, A, the Navy would know about it immediately, and B, the Navy would go to the Air Force and say, "What the hell are you people doing? We need to share now," because the Navy is ultimately on top of the game. No matter where you look, it's the Navy. The Navy's in space, the Navy's on the land, the Navy's in the sea. The Air Force, to hold something away from the Navy like this, I just don't see it.
Yeah, maybe it was only shared at the highest levels, and that's what Turber says as far as the 2004 incident, that the Navy commanders were knowledgeable. So that's telling you right there that back as early as 2004, the Navy was aware of it. So
this is a whopping story from Mr. Turber, who, in my view, to have been involved so intimately with the Las Vegas issue. You said he was involved with victims. Maybe he was sent there to become involved with victims to find out what they knew. Maybe he was doing what he was supposed to do. I don't know. But once you're in the intel community, you're always in the intel community. It's like the CIA. Same as with the mafia. You never really totally CIA. You got national security issues. You got security clearances. Anyway, it's a sticky mess. You don't just walk away fancy free. This guy's involved. In my take, Mr. Turber's involved with this. Not as a random citizen, which it sounds like he would like us to think is the case. But if he really did hint he was on a Tic Tac, I would just ask if Donald Trump or Princess Ivanka or Jerry Kushner had been on a Tic Tac. I would think that they'd want to ride, etc. Crazy times, Jim. Hold on. We'll be back.
Okay.
Jim, this story, as a professional journalist, broadcast journalist, what do you think about it right now? I don't mean to get you in trouble with your guest or anything like that. I don't know. I didn't hear it. I'm just going on what you have been very excellent in describing and offering up here. I'm drawing my conclusions from that, such as they are, which is they're not locked away. I'm still open-minded on this to a very large degree. But what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, that's a great question. I like to call myself an open-minded skeptic, and I'm usually very skeptical of these things. So I found myself afterwards thinking about, wow, the most surprising thing about all this is that I think I believe this guy. So if you'd said to me going into the interview whether I was going to believe him or not, I would have been betting that I was going to come out of it not believing him. But I came out believing, and I think the high level, the primary reason that I believe him is that the Navy has in fact confirmed that this video that's been originally leaked by that To the Stars Academy, which might be worth talking about them a little bit, but originally leaked by them, the Navy has now officially confirmed it, as we've discussed, and said that, yes, our pilots did encounter something, and those pilots have all been on record now saying that, so there's something. So now the only question in my view is, okay, is that something earthly or is it extraterrestrial? And
we also have to remember that those pilots were green-lighted to make those statements and to go on those talk shows, or they never would have.
So, yeah, is it earthly or is it extraterrestrial? When I read this Navy patent and see that the technology exists, or certainly the concepts exist, it's far easier for me to believe that these things are earthly than extraterrestrial. So that means, so for that reason, I believe Turber. Now you could then go further about, okay, what about him hinting that he rode in one? I just don't see I don't think it adds that much to the story. In fact, he really he was careful with me. He said, look, Jim, I don't want that to be the story that comes out of this interview, because then the whole debate is going to be about whether or not Turber's full of that he rode in this thing or not. I want the story to be out as to what these things are. He says that he doesn't think that it's fair that the pilots haven't been clued in on what they are, and so he didn't want that to be part of the story. And I just don't see how it helps Turber to make that, to hint that he was in one. So that's another reason that
Turber is very, very deeply connected here, somewhere, somehow. There's no chance he would go for a ride in one of those, or even hint. Why would he even bother hinting about it? He
just
knows
killing his credibility.
There's much more about this man than I think he revealed by a mile. I'm not saying he's necessarily a professional disinfo agent, but I've run across many, many people like Mr. Turber who are incredibly articulate, obviously very intelligent, wise, and gifted in whatever field they're talking about, and eminently believable. And in many cases, it turns out that, they told the truth, but they did it for the wrong reasons. They were trying to influence public opinion. They were doing a job. They were working the crowd. All right? I don't know that that's true. I'm just saying that, yes, I've heard wonderfully believable people who turned out to be a little disingenuous at times, shall we say.
Well, he certainly would say that he feels he's working on behalf of Department of Defense, that he has been given the green light.
You don't work on behalf of it. You either work for the DOD and DARPA or you don't. You don't just kind of volunteer your time and get to go on a Tic Tac ride. Doesn't happen. You get paid, you're either in it or you're out. And I think the guy's in it. So
I think so, too. What's interesting, and I'm really looking forward, as I said, to talking to these guys that have been writing these articles on the drive, but this guy, Tyler Rogaway, who I believe I'm interviewing on Monday, he, in an email, I think he's listened to the interview, and he calls him a huckster. So this guy...
Well, I haven't heard it, and I if I had the time, I would certainly sit down and do that. I don't know if huckster is the right word, but I think he's doing a job. I think he's on assignment. I think this is what he's supposed to do. I think he very well might have been sent to Las Vegas to penetrate the survivor community and do research and collect data and find out what they knew. How much did they see? Remember, there were 6 or 7 people killed who saw too much. That's our view, anyway.
Oh, you're talking about after the incident.
Correct.
Yeah.
They were online to one woman in Apple Valley who wanted to start a national blog for all survivors so they could put their information up and share what they saw. And the government didn't want that. So she's dead.
Yeah. Well, under your theory, then, he would have been a part of this cover-up because, again, I can tell you that whenever he's on my show talking about the Las Vegas shooting, he's believing in the one-shooter deranged
no, not a chance.
Theory. So,
not a chance. Not after 35-plus years in this business. Not a chance. That's just me.
Yeah, so then he's part of disinformation.
He's working for the man, okay? He just is, and that's okay. He's doing a job. It's how the narrative is run with people like that.
Right. So you would say, based on what you've heard, that he's doing a job here, but you don't necessarily disbelieve what this is in the primary story.
No, I'm not discounting the phenomena at all. No, they can be real, sure.
Yeah.
But again, breakthroughs like this were achieved in the 1930s by German scientists who built UFO discs that were flying. I put a video up showing the whole thing. I got 2 pieces of black and white footage showing 2 different kinds of German flying discs. And I have dozens of still pictures.
What was the technology that they were supposedly employing at that point?
It came from Dr. Walter Schauberger, another German genius, and he had a theory about how the planet and how energy and gravitational fields worked, and if you dialed it in right, you could go along for the ride, and you could control your vector, your speed, your altitude. There was some kind of an energetic physics field around the planet, and these craft interact with it. It's kind of like the 0 point out there. There's nothing out there, right? No, there's a lot of stuff out there, and that's energetic potential in the raw. And if you can tap into it, there's no end to what you can do. The Tic Tacs, from what you've said, work on a different principle. Have you seen all the material I just alluded to there? I'll send you a link. Send me your email. Make sure I have it. I can get it. I'll send you the video. You need to see this.
Yeah, certainly the stuff I've read is that this thing is exploiting the laws of physics, not defying the laws of physics, and that all of this is perfectly explainable. And there's been papers going back, as you point out.
Sounds like Schauberger. Sounds like Schauberger. Yeah.
So, I think that if scientists were to look at this, most of them would say, yeah, that's possible. But I think they would say, and also in my research, I found that a lot of scientists saying, but it hasn't been done yet, that it would be a huge feat to pull this off. So while the theories are out there, the execution is not there, and that we're not close to the execution of it, but not according to Turber, and not according to what you're saying you reported in the past.
This has been done, Jim, a long time ago, in the 1930s by the Germans. They had the SS had their own program of advanced science, and then there was call it a public sector with some women who were channeling information. I know that sounds kooky, but Maria Orsic was the leader, O-R-S-I-C. Look up Maria Orsic. Her group was building them. The SS was building them. Hannibal craft is what they were called. I'll send you the video so you can take a look. It's up on my YouTube channel, and many of you listening have already seen it. It's there. Now there are 2 pieces of black and white film showing 2 different craft flying in the 1930s, late 30s.
So is it your theory that all UFO sightings are theoretically terrestrial?
No, it's a mix. That's my view. We're being visited by any number of intelligent, half a dozen primary visitors are here. Look, I came across a story the other day, and I just put up a video about that. Not a video, a news story in the news last night. And it had to do with a craft that came up out of Lake Don. This is 1992, Jim. 1992. Came up out of a lake, 8 a.m. in the morning, was wobbling, obviously in trouble, worked its way over, came down and landed, crash landed, on Highway 270 in New York, 240, one of the highways, at 8 a.m. in rush hour traffic. And it landed right on the road, 100 feet in diameter, 25 feet thick. All news of that event was quashed. How? Because they can do that. Nobody talks about it. They were all warned. Everybody shut up. The craft was trucked away, put into a big warehouse, obviously cut up and moved away, maybe to Wright Pat. We don't know where it is. But this thing, imagine a 100-foot disc piloted by ETs lands at 8 o'clock in the morning on a very busy highway in a New York City town near Lake Ontario. I think it was called Lockport.
Would it be more likely to be a drone than have ETs on board?
No. This craft was too big. 100 feet.
Yeah, but why can't you
allegedly,
have an extra large drone?
Allegedly. There were hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. And you can find this story, which I did, thanks to one of our listeners who sent it to me. He found it on the Wayback Machine, April something, 1992. And clearly, there was a major operation to remove this craft and interview everyone and inform everyone that this event never happened. And they can do that. It's not hard to scare people and threaten them and get them to be totally compliant. Everyone loves their children, their families. They don't want to lose them. This is standard operating procedure.
So the extraterrestrial craft that has visited us is coming from where, and how is it getting here?
Getting here through advanced physics, like the physics that are advanced to propel the Tic Tac tech. But it's far beyond that. Where are they coming from? Potentially through wormholes in this galaxy, most likely in this galaxy. There are something like, what the hell is it? 100 billion planets in this galaxy that are Earth-like and appear to potentially be able to sustain life. So, I mean, to think we're the only game in town is so primitive. It's embarrassing. I'm trust me, I'm a firm believer that there clearly is life out there. I don't think there's any question about that, just based on the numbers. But as far as it visiting us is kind of a different story to me. Not only
visiting so far away.
us. Not only visit. No. Don't let distance influence your thinking about that. That's not the issue. They have overcome the idea of moving long distances in a very short period of time. They're 1,000 years ahead of us. 10,000 years. You choose. This planet, Jim, is 4.5 billion years old. And if anyone is silly enough to think that we're the first intelligent hominid life form to be on this planet in 4.5 billion years, well, good luck to them. We have arisen and killed ourselves off, destroyed ourselves, i.e., through stupidity and greed, or we've left the planet, migrated elsewhere, hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of times in 4.5 billion years. We're not the first here. They found stuff in the middle of bituminous coal at hundreds of feet deep, like a gold-linked bracelet for a woman, full of gold links, with a little attached, what do you call it when you connect it together? Anyway, it was a bracelet. They found things that are 1 billion years old or older in South Africa that have perfectly, they're spheres. They have perfectly grooved lines around them, 3, like the Tropic of Capricorn, Cancer, and the equator. Spheres, different size, perfect. The book you want to see, The Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Cremo, C-R-E-M-O, Cremo. He brings a lot of these anomalies forward that are hidden from the public.
Would these ancient lives look like today's humans?
Sure. They're big. We found skeletons of giants. Some were 20 feet tall. That's that particular race. Some could be shorter. It is my understanding that ET walks among us now, works with us now, and has been involved with a hybridization program for many, many decades. The book by Dr. David Jacobs of Temple University called The Threat is another one you want to read. Very interesting book. But to think that we're the only people here in the universe or the galaxy is really asinine, silly. People, life forms, intelligent life can take many different forms. The tall blondes are said to look like us. The reptilians don't look like us, all right? There are many different, the taxonomy of extraterrestrial life forms is extensive. There are many different kinds. But the type that look like us can pass for us and do and are working with us right now in advanced biotechnology, bio-nanotechnology, advanced physics. They're bringing us along slowly. We haven't made these enormous strides in the last 50, 60 years on our own. We've had help. Not that we couldn't eventually do it, but the explosion in the growth is mind-boggling. Anyway, these are just things that I'm putting out there. Take them or leave them.
Yep. No. It's fascinating stuff. One other thing I was going to bring up was just about the To the Stars Academy. I don't know how much you've been tracking those folks.
Not a lot.
So they recently entered into a contract with the Army. Did you hear about that at all?
Tell me. I think I have, but I honestly, I've got a cluttered mind.
So it's the To the Stars Academy. These are the guys that released the video, and they've got that guy Alonzo, if I'm getting his name, Luis Elizondo, who used to run the ATIP program for the U.S.
There was he fell into disfavor for a while. Now I guess he's been rehabilitated.
Yeah, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Right.
Which was funded under Harry Reid under some scandalous terms and so forth. And Elizondo's now hooked up with the To the Stars Academy. And then they just announced, which I found interesting, the timing that is so recent, that they've entered into a contract with the U.S. Army. Will work with the Army to characterize technology under the organization's control and then use the tech to improve military vehicles. Hold on one second. Let me find the. It says the government, according to the contract, the government is interested in a variety of the collaborators' technologies. That's this To the Stars Academy, such as but not limited to inertial mass reduction. What we've been talking about with the Tic Tacs, inertial mass reduction. So here's a contract between the Army and these guys. Mechanical structural metamaterials, electromagnetic metamaterial waveguides, quantum physics, quantum communications, and beamed energy propulsion. The contract entails the research of metamaterial exploitation for the purposes of active camouflage and directed photo projection. On the last point, an Army spokesman tells me that the To the Stars Academy has conveyed it has means of supporting camouflage, concealment, deception, and obscuration interests.
Obscuration, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Did you have a chance to hear any of the William Tompkins interviews?
No, you guys sent that to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but he was a remarkable man, 93, 94 years old, and never missed a beat. Never missed a beat. So there's another big story. It's when the Navy made the announcement that, yes, they are UFOs, yes, we see them all the time, especially off the East Coast, in my view, the cover-up ended. That was the end of it. But they seem to be kind of trying to backstep on it a little bit now. I don't know. I think the Air Force kept something from the Navy for 20 years. Not a chance.
Yeah. Well, again, according to Turber, Navy was high command was clued in on it as early as 2004. So I don't think it was kept at the higher levels. But I do think it's very odd as to why they came forward and confirmed these videos and confirmed what these pilots saw. Yet did not disclose what they were,
right.
considering that they knew what they were at that time. And now, according to Turber, want to start leaking this information out to the public through kind of slow leaks. Turber claims he's not the only one who's been, given this information, and now has instructions to get this information out there.
I honestly think that most Americans would essentially yawn and go back to their football games or smartphones. Oh, well, we knew it. We've been conditioning people since the 1950s that we're not alone through Hollywood. So they're just not going to be shocked.
Well, we've already seen it. There was a big yawn when the video was first released, when the Navy even confirmed it. I mean, if the news does not involve a Trump tweet, the mainstream media doesn't cover it. Who's going to cover it?
Very true. Yeah. In my view, after all this research, over all these years, talking to all of these individuals, we are being visited constantly. We have treaties with some of them. We have certainly the hybrid program, I think, is quite real. They are walking amongst us. They are working in various sensitive and very highly advanced technological labs and programs to help bring us along at their pace. They've got the tech. They're giving it to us and bringing us along slowly, I think, hoping that we'll make rational, pragmatic decisions and not send nuclear weapons into space, which would get us hit with a fly swatter. That's what we deserve. Stupid. Breaking the atom was stupid. Look what we got with Fukushima. And now we have an extinction event underway. There's nothing left. Birds, bugs, small animals, almost gone.
One thing I'd be curious your thoughts on. It seems to me that this technology works extremely well as far as flying within the atmosphere. But once you leave the Earth's gravitational pull,
do the physics work there? I don't know.
Well, the physics are mostly about defying gravity, so it seems to have of an impact, flown within the atmosphere. But in space, you already have virtually no gravitational pull, right? So I would imagine that the technology is not quite as valuable in space.
I don't know. It's an interesting speculation. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Turber would know. I don't know. He's clearly one of those who's out there spreading information and a little disinformation. He's part of the mechanism, okay? Part of the narration. I think that's what he is all about. But this aspect of being involved with the Las Vegas massacre, that it didn't just happen. He didn't just decide to drive up there and do his own research. Sorry, doesn't happen. He knows a lot more.
So what's it going to take for the mainstream media to cover the story?
The dissolution of the stranglehold that 6 corporations have over 95+% of all the media, period. When Clinton deregulated it, we're going to have to go back to regulation where individual companies and corporations, thousands of them, will be able to buy into the radio and television market again, although by then there won't be any radio and television left because it's all changing so fast. In 5 years, Joe, we're not going to have anything much to say because it'll be all AI. We'll be the second-ranking sentient intelligence on the planet. AI is coming, and nanotech is here. Keep that in mind.
I believe it.
Thank you for being here. Great to talk with you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Enjoyed it, Jeff.
Thank you to Jeff Rense for having me on his show and for allowing us to play the interview on our podcast. You can catch all of Jeff's shows by going to rense.com. That's RENSE.com. Thank you to Michael Parker, our producer. Thank you all for listening to The Hidden Truth Show. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.